everyone. It is Monday, December 4th. I'm calling to order the Middleton School Committee meeting for elementary school. This meeting is recorded. Would everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm guessing there won't be any remarks from the public tonight. So we'll move on to approving the minutes from November 7th.
And just so the team's aware, Colleen is not feeling well tonight, but so she'll do the minutes from the recording.
Okay.
So she'll watch the recording afterwards and then do the minutes from there. But the minutes are in the drive. They are for 11/7/23.
Okay.
Oh, I think it is still locked.
Are you not able to get on? I set this, I can't be reached.
Maybe throw a chair in there, Jeff, or something, a book.
Well, I had, it was open, but.
Yeah. The drive. Go into the drive, and the minutes will be in.
Hey, Julie.
Hey, Morgan.
Yeah.
Approving November 2023 minutes.
I love that Howie is listed on the
Present.
attendance list. Okay, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from November 7th.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes from November 7th, say aye. Aye. Any nays? Okay. Moving on.
Great. Good to see everybody. Happy Monday. Do you need a few more minutes, Julie, to get settled, or are you feeling like... All right, do you have an HDMI hookup on that?
I do not bring a club. Actually,
If you don't, we can
I
go
think
right...
I do. Yes, I do.
You want to hook up to the board?
Sure.
If not, we can go right from the drive.
Yeah, no,
I put the presentation
There's
as
a hassle.
hanging over the top left.
The drive.
And so we welcome Julie. If Jeff, you want to do an introduction for the whole committee, and then we will go to Julie to talk a little bit about her recent experience.
Sure, I think you've been hearing about it since last spring. We first brought it to you. Julie was a National Geographic Fellow, recently traveled to Patagonia. I gave you a brief
Julie, press switch.
update last month on her trip. Julie will do a much better job of showing you actually what she did and what she's going to do with that experience as well.
So it's in the drive, and then Julie will also present from the screen up there. But this was been meeting with Jeff and Julie along the way as well. Quite an accomplishment for Julie to be selected to be a part of this fellowship for sure. So Julie, we'll turn it right over to you.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks for having me again. I know I feel like it was May or June that I was here last. So I'm excited to be back and really share with you about the experience now that I've gone. I've been back about a month now. I was telling Jeff today this was very, very challenging to put together, to encompass like a 2-week experience and convey as much as I saw, as much as I learned, as much as we're implementing into the classroom. So I'm excited to kind of bring you along. The Grosvenor Teacher Fellowship, which was the fellowship that I had been awarded, it's coined as the professional development opportunity of a lifetime, and it truly was. I think, you know, having now experienced it and still like reflecting and taking it all in, but it truly like to be in this part of the world that was so pristine. We were the only people there. When we were sailing through the Chilean fjords, we were the only ship there. There were not houses, they're not shacks, they're, like nobody is there. So to really be there and have the students come along and share that with them and now kind of implement all my learning has been a once in a lifetime opportunity. So just to kind of refresh your memory, I know I had talked to you in last kind of spring about where I went, but I headed to the end of the world. So where we started our expedition was in Ushuaia. So Ushuaia is the southernmost city in the world. Argentinians call it the end of the world. They have a phrase that kind of translates to the end of the world. It's where, you know, the Pan American Highway, you know the Pan American Highway that runs all the way from Alaska. It ends right there in Ushuaia. It's a 19,000-mile highway. It's like the longest road that you could possibly take. And so that's where it ends, and that's where we started our expedition. So if you really think about kind of how southern we were and where we headed, that is really where we began. So we were literally at the end of the road, which is pretty cool. So what I'm going to do is kind of talk to you about what the expedition kind of experience was like. You can feel free to jump in or ask questions, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some things I learned and then how I'm implementing it with the students. So really, while I was there, we were exploring. We were learning about the land. We were observing wildlife, the fauna, the flora, the fungi, kind of everything that encompasses this land. So this is the Bernal Glacier. If you're familiar with the Bernal Glacier, it's receding at one of the largest rates out of any of the glaciers that exist. So we were really fortunate to actually be able to experience this glacier, as a lot of future generations may not be able to because it's receding so aggressively. These are just a couple other images. So we spent a lot of time observing wildlife. We were really fortunate to be able to see a king penguin. So we had some unfortunate weather our first couple days. We actually couldn't set sail. Our ship was late. When we finally set sail, we had like 9 feet swells, then we had 14 feet swells. We couldn't land the first 2 days. So when we finally landed, it was now like the second day. Our expedition leader was our second landing of the day, and he's like, "Oh, you know, there's a king penguin waiting to greet you." We thought he was joking. we literally, some people didn't bring their camera. I asked him, we were like, "Is there a statue there?" You know, and literally when we got ashore, this king penguin, there's one king penguin colony that is on Isla de los Estados. It's an island that is off of Argentina. We had special permission to access this island. We actually had people on board with us that were making sure we were scrubbing our feet, washing our pants, anything we put on the ground. So yeah, we actually got to experience and kind of observe this king penguin for a little bit, which was just, I mean, it was an amazing experience.
How big was he?
Not as big as you would have thought, but bigger, I would say maybe like this big. He was probably like about as far as the door is from me. We obviously, you know, we learned all the rules and we had to keep our distance. And this one, he actually, so penguins, they mate for life, right? So usually they're with their colonies and they're with them forever. He was actually by himself, and they determined later, they told us that he had a gouge on his neck, so they think he was injured. He had since healed, but they think that he was lost, like he wasn't with his colony. We went to Caraquita National Park, and we were able to just observe elephant seals for hours. It's a private conservation land. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it later. But the elephant seals come to this area to breed, so we got to see their pups. We got to see them. They were literally just scattered everywhere, right? Like we were the outsiders coming into this land, and we just got to really observe them. One day we took Zodiac cruises out. This is when we were a little bit more northern. So this, as I was saying, these are the exact locations we went to. So down here, there was really nobody. Once we finally got up here where we disembarked, we came across some fishing ships. And so we were out on Zodiac boats, and the naturalist who was driving our Zodiac was like, "Oh, there's a fishing boat. Let's just go over and talk to them." We took the Zodiac boat right over. He spoke Spanish. He was translating our questions, so we were asking them questions about like what it's like. And they will be on those ships from July to December. They do not leave their ship, and their ship was tiny. And so we just, talked with them. They catch king crabs. They tried to sell us some. They were selling them to us for $16 a king crab, which is so cheap. They were saying that these king crabs will end up in the United States, right, like on our tables at our restaurants. My students thought it was hilarious. They had TikTok and Netflix on this tiny little ship because they use Starlink, which is internet through the satellite. So it was, all these kind of fascinating different pieces of information. I was really fascinated by the ice. So we were able to hike to glaciers, kayak by glaciers. The ice was truly, truly fascinating. One day we went out and kayaked and we could hear, there was like, icebergs drifting by you, you're paddling through the ice and it's popping. It's like snap, crackle, and popping. And it's pieces of glacier, right? So these ice are all just broken off, they've calved off from the glacier. And there's ice pockets, or air pockets in it, so that's what the popping is. And you literally felt like it sounded like you were in a bowl of Rice Krispie treats, just as you're like going through, you can hear the popping. And then Howie came along. I had Flat Howie, so all the naturalists, the experts, he'd come around and we'd take pictures with them, and then sent those back so the students in the school could see what he was up to. So that was a good portion of it, right? We'd have landings, we'd explore, and then what we would do, we would learn. Essentially, like, this was all professional development. I learned so much. I think some of the things, someone asked me a question the other day, and they're like, how do you know that? I was like, I only know that because I just learned it, right? Like, exposed to kind of a wealth of knowledge that I honestly, some of it didn't even know existed, and now I know it. So we would have every single night, there was a nightly debrief. So the naturalists, the experts, they would, like one day we would hike to the glacier, we'd have a lecture that night on glacial recession. We learned about the indigenous culture and people of Patagonia. We actually had someone from the Wildlife Conservation Society come on board, so they invite guest speakers on board. So every night we would have a debrief and essentially like learn more about what you saw. And then if we were ever sailing, so there were some mornings we might have been at sea or afternoons we were at sea, they would have lectures. So, there was a National Geographic photographer who would give sessions on his work, and he'd talk you through how he took his pictures and he'd show you them. He'd talk about being on assignment. We presented to the Grosvenor Teacher Fellowship, but we presented on kind of what it is and then how we're incorporating it into our classrooms. Another piece that I was really fascinated by. So while we were exploring on land, there were underwater specialists. So there were two people who were underwater specialists, and they would dive. So we might, go out to the National Reserve, go to Tierra del Fuego, and then they would dive in the water. And then every night they would show film of what they saw while they were diving. And so we were sitting one night, and as we're watching the film, waiting for kind of debrief to start, the teachers and I were all talking, what is that? What is that creature? And the underwater specialist, one of them actually grew up on the Cape, which was funny. It's where she started diving. But when she started talking, she was saying that they spent all day trying to figure out what this species is, and they don't know what it is. They don't know if it's an anemone, a sponge. And she was saying, it's like 70% of underwater that is undiscovered. We know more about space than we do underground or underwater. So that was really fascinating. It was also fascinating to compare the underwater species we have here to there, the difference in size and shape and species. So that was a really cool part of it. On the expedition, the bridge, so where the navigation was open all the time. You could go in at any time of day, minus when we had really rough sea, and then there was one area that was extremely tough to navigate, but you could just go into the bridge, you could talk to the captain, he'd actually talk you through how he navigated. A really interesting piece is that in Chile, where we were, the Chilean fjords, you have to have Chilean pilots on board because they're so uncharted. Like, we would go to these places and I would put them in Google Maps later and it wouldn't come up, and then I'd go to the naturalist and where were we today? Like, can you help me find it? So we had Chilean pilots on board. So that was, again, just kind of another really fascinating piece of the expedition. We really saw the behind the scenes of, on assignment, we had a filmographer and photographers on board, and they were phenomenal. You could, walk out with them and you'd say, talk me through what you're doing and how you're doing this. And so we kind of got this behind the scenes look at that. The naturalists were so knowledgeable in, everything. They each kind of had different specialties, right, that were their areas of expertise. One night, one of the naturalists brought us outside and he just taught us how to navigate with the Southern Stars. So we saw the Southern Cross and he talked about how you navigate with them. So there really was kind of this wide array of knowledge that we learned across a lot of different subject areas. I think the major things that, having experienced and now come back to it, I think this was something I wanted to highlight. In my classroom, we talk a lot about how our actions impact the environment, right? And how the environment impacts our actions. So it's all kind of about this interconnected world. And so being in this location that, people don't live there, people aren't there, right? In the port city, there was, people who lived there, but not really in these other locations. So we had headed to, this is Karakinka National Park. This is where we spent hours kind of observing the elephant seals. It's about the size of Rhode Island, this kind of conservation area. If you don't know much about Patagonia Patagonia is there are multiple people who are really trying to conserve the area and keep it wild, right? So it's actually the founder of the Patagonia brand and North Face brand. They're the Tompkins, if you know them at all. There's a great documentary about them right now. But they have essentially taken their fortune and they have bought land there and they are giving it back to the government, trying to conserve the wildlife that's there. So this one we went to is a private reserve. It actually was bought by Goldman Sachs and has since been donated back. We're talking like, I think the Tompkins, it's 15 million acres right now that they have donated back. So this was a really protected area. You can't get there. There are no roads that lead there. And I think it was fascinating to see kind of this standard for conservation that's happening. So if you're standing here, so our ship was way over here, we had to take Zodiacs in, and you just turned this way, this is all plastic. So there was plastic littering the whole entire kind of right side of this beach here. And you can't quite see, but there's elephant seals in here. Some of these logs are actually elephant seals. And they were explaining to us that if you kind of look at a map where Patagonia is and where we were, the wind and the water can circumnavigate the whole entire globe without hitting any land. So they're saying it's almost like a wind tunnel. If you're familiar with like the Pacific Garbage Patch, it's another wind tunnel where it all gets trapped because of the tides. So it was just fully littered with plastic. And we were actually able to spend some time cleaning it up. They had, Rodrigo was the Wildlife Conservation Society member who was on board with us. And he actually said they had to check if we could clean it up. So they were kind of like, just a heads up, it's going to be a little jarring. How much plastic is there? We're finding out because they do a lot of research, right? So like, where is the plastic from? How long has it had been there? What kind of currents has it taken to get to this location? So we actually spent probably a solid hour, maybe more, cleaning it up. And then we ended up filling a whole entire Zodiac boat, right? Because you have to like take it back to shore. They then have to take it to a particular location. So I think this is one of those things that, you know, I've always talked about environmental education in my class and teaching students kind of about conservation efforts in our kind of town of Middleton. And I think it's one thing to talk about it with the kids, and it's one thing to, you know, show videos of the Pacific Garbage Patch and of the plastic crisis that's happening. And it was truly another to experience, to really like see it. You had like an elephant seal pup with plastic right next to it. So that was something that I think has kind of just been staying with me. This is the Middleton crew from home. So this is what the students were up to. I think something that was really special just about the whole fellowship is that, yes, I physically got to go, but everyone else was there with me and everyone was experiencing it. My class, the school, colleagues, community. So this is just some things that my class and school were kind of up to. So I had I'd sent out to the school and a bunch of other classrooms and people that I'm connected with, like a daily 10-minute activity to learn about Patagonia. So students in Hellmanning were doing that. And it was just kind of a snippet of me, where in the world I was, and then like a quick 10-minute activity to learn about it. My mom, Mrs. Clipwell, was my substitute, so she was adding pictures every day to the board in the hallway so students could see kind of geographically where I was. My students played Explorer Bingo, so I had given them a blank bingo board, and each letter was a different, I think B was be on the lookout for, I was IC, all related to Explorer activities. My students had done research about what I might see, what I might do, and then they got to fill their board in from a word bank. I think that was a true highlight for them. If you know my mother at all, she's a big technology person, so she actually sent these to me, and she had the kids pretend they were with me because they were learning every day, and she screened them in, and they said, you know, thanks for packing me in today. I was here. I can't wait to see what we do tomorrow. And I was showing that to like the National Geographic experts and the naturalists, and they couldn't believe some of the tech skills that the students had. So those were fun to get while I was there. I had talked to you last spring about some of the ways I was integrating it into the curriculum. My students last year with our JDO partner, the other program that I'm a part of, had made their expedition guide to Patagonia. I actually brought it, had it on board. Everyone was kind of looking at it. This year, my students are working on a Google Earth project with their JDO. That's the other program, another program that I'm a part of in England. And so they have been, that class also did the 10-minute slideshow, so really learned about these different locations. And they're working together, so 2 from my US class, 2 from the England class, to write kind of a little introduction to these different locations. Let's see. We've been working we kind of did a cross-curriculum activity with Mrs. Dealey in Innovation. So my students have been making a stop motion. We blew up giant pictures and they made stories to go along with the location. And so they're working on a stop motion right now, inspired by it. then this is coming soon, so something that I've been doing, I had applied separately. There's another program National Geographic was running. It's an immersive technology pilot program. So 10 fellows, 10 of the, like my cohort, were selected to partake in this immersive technology pilot program. And so I've been having trainings with the National Geographic and Disney immersive production team to learn how to take 360 videos, pictures, and then take that and turn it into an immersive experience for the students. So they had sent me a bunch of stuff. I was filming, I was joking with the kids that being on assignment is really hard. The wind was something that I was not prepared with, so I had practiced a lot with the 360 camera, with the stand. Patagonia wind was like nothing I have ever experienced. There were multiple times I thought my phone was going to fly out of my hand. I thought I was going to get knocked over, so it's very often that the camera ended up on the ground. But we made it work. I was building rocks around it, and I was telling the kids you had to innovate, right? You had to think of different ways. And so then from there, we're waiting. There's 2 other expeditions happening right now that people have 360 cameras. And when that's done, we'll have some more trainings on editing it. And so putting it into this VR experience for the students and creating curriculum activities to go with it. I did put on there kind of a sneak peek, and I'll show you just a quick sneak peek, but these are just some of the photos. So my VR experience will be videos that then I'll have audio kind of explaining so you understand and can learn more from it. But these are just some 360 photos. So this is the Vernal Glacier. Our expedition leader, we had a mentor on board who helped us, so he helped me get this kind of cool video of the Vernal Glacier. This is a sub-Antarctic forest. Again, you just kind of get like this 360 feel of what it's like. This right here was Karakinka National Park, where the elephant seals are all on the land. Students really like this one. This is just from the bow of the ship. So this is the National Geographic Explorer. That was the ship that we were on. And this is the Chilean fjords. So just kind of a sneak peek that will be coming as a VR immersive experience for the students. And then I think as I was saying, I've been back, I think like a month. And I'm a fast processor. I do things really fast, if you can't tell. I think this is an experience that it's taking me a lot longer to process than I think I would have expected. It's, every day I reflect on it a little bit more, something happens and I think back to it. These are just like some of the impacts that I've felt and seen and thought about since I've been back. I think, talk to me in a year, there's probably going to be way more. Talk to me in 3 years, there'll probably be way more. But I think a big one is just kind of this amplified ability to build and explore a mindset in my students. The other day I just was overhearing a conversation and one of my students said to another one, she was like, I can't believe it, our teacher's like an explorer, like a real explorer. But I always talk in my classroom about how exploring can be in the library, it can be in the classroom, it can be outside. So really building that explorer mindset, and it doesn't have to be far away. Exploring is just being curious. It's caring about the planet. It's feeling empowered to make a change. So I feel like I have this kind of amplified ability to do that now. I definitely have this, just an enhanced understanding of the natural world, right? Like I had this intense immersive experience into a vast biodiverse location, right? Like the ecosystem, I think the indigenous culture of Patagonia was really fascinating to me. So just kind of this enhanced understanding of that natural world. I think a new understanding of geographic awareness. If you had asked me before, I would have said I really try to, extend my students' learning beyond the 4 walls of the classroom or beyond the 4 walls of the school. I think I thought I had a geographic awareness, and I think now it's been even extended further and just like a new understanding really of the world. As I was talking, kind of that explorer mindset of a deeper sense of wonder and curiosity. I still walk down the hallway and kids from different grades, how was Patagonia? What did you do this? Or I see adults, or I see colleagues, and still kind of that sense of wonder about the world. And then as I was saying, I think I've always really integrated this kind of environmental education into what I do. I do a huge Poetry for the Planet project with my students, and really having students find their voice to kind of create change. And I think through this experience that has been like newly fueled. I think it's a passion that's always been there, but I think I have kind of this firsthand experience now to speak to and really engage students, and how can we implement that within our school community, and how does that impact help our regional community? How does it help the global community? And then something else, I think, this is something I think I have been reflecting a lot on. just like in this part of the world, the fauna, the flora, the fungi, they really have to like persevere to live through this harsh environment. I think being there, we were there in spring, so this was like lovely weather, which I think was fascinating because there were days like you'd walk outside and you would literally just like the wind would just move you. So I've been really thinking about how do you take that, right? This kind of ability to persevere through a harsh environment to build character within our students, right? Like I call it kind of like that discovery of the Patagonian culture. How do we take that and emulate it within our class? I don't know, something I'm kind of pondering and thinking a lot about. And then I have been blogging about it, so this is really just like a snippet of what I've done. So feel free if you want to learn more about all the different locations that I went to, or learn more about what I'm doing. Those will just links to my blog that I've been putting information on. And always thank you for your support and everything that I've done.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah, it was truly unbelievable. We didn't do the polar plunge. We had horrible weather the first 2 days, like horrible. Like the boat was like. So we were originally supposed to sail to Cape Horn, but when you sail to Cape Horn, you're in open water, and the captain was like, "Nope, not happening." So in order to do a polar plunge, you have to be in polar water. So we never actually made it quite to polar water because we went back through the Beagle Channel, which I joke is my new best friend because it protected us from the harsh waves and the wind.
So were you just like stuck inside the boat like during that time? Did you get seasick?
Luckily, I did not get seasick. Some other people were not so fortunate, but the ship actually couldn't get to us. We were supposed to set sail at like 3 or 4 one day. We ended up not getting on the ship until midnight, and then we couldn't because it was coming from Brazil, so it got stuck in the storm on the way down. We were in Ushuaia, so we were able to kind of experience just a culture of a city so far south. We were able to go, there's a prison there. Ushuaia became a city because in order for Argentina to recognize it as a city, they needed to have a prison there. So we went and it's no longer in existence. It's kind of reminded me a lot of Alcatraz, but they had a lot of kind of like explorer information. And so we were able to do that. We got on the ship late that night. We didn't set sail the next morning. We had to wait a little bit. And whenever that, we had lectures. So that morning we had a lecture on Drake, Magellan, and the Beagle. We could go outside, and then we set sail that afternoon. That was the night we had 9 feet swells that night, which was like, I had never been on a boat like this before. So I kept being like, oh, I don't know, what is seasick? Am I seasick? I don't know. So we made it through the night. I saw the captain in the morning, and I was chatting with him at breakfast, and I was like, so like, what was that? And he was like, oh no, not too bad, like 9 feet, totally fine. The next night, we had 14 feet swells. Luckily, again, did not get seasick. I went outside. If I went outside, I could like film it, but it was quite an experience. I took a shower the night of 14 feet swells, which was a total mistake because the water is just going up the wall, up the wall, up the wall. I couldn't get down the drain.
You have to like strap yourself in. So you don't let it all
I
out?
took it so fast. The first night I didn't lock the closet. So all the drawers lock. Everything is like nailed down, right? I didn't lock my closet door. So at like 2 a.m. I just hear boom, boom. And I'm like, what is that? The ship was rocking so much that the closet door was going like this, and then like this, and then like this, and then like this. So everything kind of got locked down. And then after that, it was fine. It was more just kind of like the gentle sway. But as I said to the kids, it's part of the experience, right?
Yeah.
You kind of like learn, and it's definitely part of it. And I didn't get seasick, so that's probably why I'm saying that.
Yeah. Awesome. Congrats. No.
Yeah, thank you
Oh,
so much.
congrats. That sounds
Thank you for
amazing.
sharing with us.
And thank you to the committee, too, for supporting, the endeavor. Obviously, there was coverage needs and things that we had for Julie to attend this, and so we appreciate the committee's support of that. And I feel we're just very fortunate to have staff in our town of Middleton that are willing to, try new things and be innovative and bring that experience to the kids. And I get super excited about that last slide with the VR goggles, because we talked about that at our last meeting about developing a partnership with XR Terror and getting some goggles. We're getting 10 pairs of goggles in, as you probably know by now, into each of the towns, and just to start to pilot a few things and kind of muck around with it a little bit to see what the impact will be on teaching and learning. And so I get excited to see, we're already starting to think about some of those things. So thank you for that as well, Julie.
Yeah, and I think partnering it too, like what I'll do is, taking that VR experience and then, like I was talking a lot about kind of just this conservation effort and caring about the planet, right? Kind of tying those two things together, I think is really, really powerful too. I will say we presented on board, and you think of these National Geographic and Lindblad experts as like experts, and a lot of them came up after and just couldn't believe what we were doing in our schools, right? I talked a lot about like what our kids do, talked about what our schools do, and they were so impressed. I think what's with what's happening here, and that is the testament to our teachers, the school committee, to our administration. Like they really had a lot, like, I can't believe your class does that. I can't believe you have, you know, fourth graders who are doing this, this, and this. So I think it is a testament to everything that happens here, which is great. Thank you.
I think we're fortunate to have you. I think
Yeah.
you were the right person. You have the right mentality, you like the exploration part of it, but you're able to tie it to the students and, bring that enthusiasm back. You know what I mean? I see it, you're passionate about it. That's an unbelievable trip of a lifetime. I'm jealous.
It really has been. It's been an
Very
experience
jealous.
of a lifetime. And I think that made it truly special. Like, yes, I got to go here. Yes, I got to do these really cool things. But, like, doing it with the students and bringing them along, it was something I have never done, probably will never be able to do again, right? And that made it so special, right? Like, they're getting the questions of, where are you? What are you doing? I think that made it just that much better, right? And, I was learning along. If you go and talk to any of my students or even the students in school, some of the things they tell you, you're like, what's the southernmost city? Oh, Shia, there's a fight right now with Port William. Like, they can just kind of talk to you about things that I didn't know 3 months ago, right? So I think that's been really special too.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, a couple of other quick updates, and Julie, thanks again. Fuller Meadow driveway, so we had talked about this last go-round, as we know, with the project, the municipal project that's happening down at the golf course. That is a big part of how we function at Fuller Meadow, having overflow parking during dismissal time. So we've been working with the town. We have a draft study of the work. Danisco is a designer that we've worked with for years, actually built Palm Manning and did a lot of work at Fuller Meadow as well. So they've come out, we're waiting for the final report. They're making a couple of tweaks to it. So the draft report we met on last week and had an opportunity to go through it. My takeaways, and Jen can jump in here as well, she's met with Ken Danisco, was the lead on that project. My takeaways are a few things, some short-term solutions and then some longer-term solutions. And the short-term solutions would consist of, one, having Justin work with the OPM, the owner's project manager, and the bidding contractor on allowing us to continue to use the golf course at least through June, right? Even though construction's going to start. And we had a conversation, Steve and I had a conversation with Justin this morning, and he's going to work really hard at making that happen and building that into any sort of bid documentation that we still need a little parcel of land for us to do our thing to get us through June, which would be a huge help. So while that process is unfolding there, another piece is we need to do a broader survey of the entire property. We have lots of GIS maps and things like that, but we don't actually have a true survey to know our property boundaries. As Michelle and some others know, like right off the driveway, there's a little rock wall that's into the woods, and we kind of thought, like, maybe that's the old-fashioned property line from 150 years ago or something. The initial thinking is that our property may only go like 9 feet into the woods, not all the way to that rock wall area. But a survey would help us with a couple of things. It would give us contours, because if we ever go with the bigger solution, and I'll talk to you about the bigger solution in a minute, we need to figure about stormwater management and drainage and some of those other things. So a survey would be helpful with that. And then it would also be helpful with helping us determine what a maybe future bigger project would be. And we're thinking small-term impacts, summer of '24, and then potentially larger-term project in summer of '25. So the two immediate things are get moving on the survey and having the conversations with the folks who will be building down at the municipal complex to make sure that we can continue to use that. Shorter term as well, in terms of potential work for summer of '24, would be to figure out if we can do more queuing on our current property. There's some small changes and fixes that we can make. For example, if you think of the little turnaround down the end of the driveway there outside of the library, if you think of that as like the letter C, it's like these little sort of wings at the end of it. Cutting those off and making it more of a U, and to try to increase flow and capacity in the back there. And then eliminating some parking in order for us to do more queuing on site. And so I was saying to Michelle a little bit before the meeting, one of the things we're going to do potentially in the next couple of weeks before the snow flies is get some cones from DPW. This is like a real, basic way to do sort of a traffic study. Block off like 20 spots, let's say, 15, 20 spots, put a cone there, send a notice out to families, and have signage up on the campus like, please don't park where the orange cone is, right? We want to see if we eliminated like 15, 20 spots, can we still fit everybody, all the staff parking, visitors that come in, itinerant staff, and so on and so forth. That would allow us to see like, okay, we could actually next summer do some repaving, move some, cut down some smaller trees, and allow us the opportunity to queue more on our current location. Longer term, which would be summer of '25, is sort of like two potential ideas being thrown around. One of which is, if you picture where the playground is now at Fuller Meadow, kind of right off the parking lot, moving that playground over sort of behind the modulars, in between the baseball field and the modulars, would be a little bit more hidden. Recapturing that as like a paved area, use that for parking and additional bus queuing, so you'd really lengthen the bus queuing lane, and you'd add any lost parking that we might lose in a temporary solution. The other thing is, the survey would tell us if another potential fix would be a road all the way around the property and have just a massive, ability to queue, and then you'd have tons of property we take all the cars off of 114 out of the golf course parking lot, so on and so forth. So those are the longer term pieces that we'll work with the town on, but again, short term is the survey and this sort of, very sort of simple traffic study. Jen, anything I missed or anything from Ken that?
The only other
That's
thing
fine.
I can think of is when you think of the entranceway into the
Oh, right.
Fuller Meadow, it's kind of like, if you're coming from Hal
right
Manning
turn.
and you go to make a right, it is a hard right. It's almost like
Yeah.
so what happens is the bus is trying to navigate that turn without cars there is tricky, but you have cars parked parallel. Now you have cars coming in. So it's a bit of a real nightmare for the buses, and in having Doug from the fire department,
Yeah.
the chief, it's also sort of unsafe in terms of when you have that going on, if an emergency vehicle had to come in, like, oh, gosh, help us, right? So what we were talking about is Ken was saying if we could, on each side of the entrance, sort of cut it wider, soften the edges, but that's going to depend on the survey to find out exactly how much do we own and what might have to get negotiated. But he's trying to help us see how we could potentially have 4 lanes available if we took out parking for queuing, so that you have a group coming in, a group going out, but now the buses have a place to go on their own when they have to kind of come around and pass all these people, and if emergency vehicles had to get in and out. So that's sort of part of the survey thing
Yeah.
too, is to figure that out, and that's not something you would do like overnight. So he's been incredibly helpful, and I've appreciated meeting with him.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Any questions on that?
Is the frontage on 114, that's going to be part of the survey, like, is that, right when you take that right? is
That'll be
that-
part of it. Yeah, for sure. It's the whole, it'll be like really a 360, if you almost like a drone view of the property, Dave, it'll be that sort of 360 all the way around the property. I'm curious to see how much we own coming down the driveway to the right, because to me, that's a
huge.
That's a real potential solution.
Yeah.
Like, there's trees and there's power lines, but those aren't like obstacles that can't be overcome, right? If we owned enough of that and we could kind of push everything to the right, I think that would potentially solve a lot of issues. And then if you think about coming all the way around the back, it gets really thin. There's some houses back here, and it gets really thin back there. I don't know how much of that we own and then what the setbacks would have to be. And I think Doug said for a fire truck, the road needs to be at a minimum 20 feet wide, right? So do you have 20 feet of travel lane and then sort of the left and right sort of softer areas as well? So more to come on it for sure. Traffic study itself, what we'll do for now, and we have this conversation with Justin, we'll use our operating budget to pay for this work so far. I think it was around $13,000 for all of the Ken Danisco work. See where we are at the end of the year. As you know, sometimes at the end of the year with all the offsets and, some expenses come in cheaper, winter could be different. So like kind of see where we are. If we have tailings at the end of the year, tailings is when there's some funding that is unspent funding. And so for now, just working with the town, we'll cover it through the school operating budget, and then if there's a conversation that has to be had at the end of the year, this conversation Justin and I had it this morning, we could have that conversation as we navigate towards the end of the fiscal year. And then the broader survey, we're getting a cost estimation on the survey, or we're getting a cost estimation on what the short-term fix might cost, and we're getting a cost estimation on what a bigger term fix might
Yeah.
cost as well.
Yeah.
So those are all pieces that are in the chute as we speak. And then just the last update from me, this is something we had talked about, I think, at the end of last year. The town, in its sort of notion of continuing to try to recruit and attract personnel to all departments, looking to change the health insurance splits. Right now, it's a 60-40 health insurance split where the town pays 60 and the employee pays 40. And I think they're looking to up that to like 62-38 at the town level for all departments, not just the teachers and the staff that work in the education department, but also municipal departments as well, police and fire and so on and so forth. So Jackie is leading that charge, navigating and working with all of different unions and towns. I believe the way it works is all of the unions would have to agree to that change in order for it to take place. And so right now, Carrie and Katie are aware of this conversation. They're working with their association as well. We have a meeting with them on Thursday, just a regular monthly check-in meeting. And, I think once if all the unions signed off, then at the town level, that split would change to 62-38 across the board. So more to come on that as well. And that's it for me.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You're up, Steve.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Madam Chair, I've got to say my report is really nothing to report. Everything is going along as it should be from a fiscal perspective, and we are well underway with the FY25 budget process. That's my report. So I will stop and answer any questions that you guys may have.
No, I don't have anything.
Any questions?
No. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Trying to make up for some time.
Like a pilot.
Okay, where are we? We can get back to the agenda. Okay, so report from the principals, November updates.
I will not be as brief as Mr. Greenberg, but I will also be fairly brief. It has been quiet. We used to, in the past, we've always had Spirit Week, that last week before Christmas vacation. I got some feedback from some families that they did not like Spirit Week. It's very stressful for parents, apparently, to get all the gear and everything organized day to day. So we took that feedback and we now have Wear It Wednesdays, which is each Wednesday from Thanksgiving to Christmas, we are having a different theme. Last Wednesday was Sports Day. This upcoming Wednesday is Twin or Triplet Day. So dressing similar to others. Mr. Druin and I will have a stepbrothers thing going on for that one.
Which stepbrother did you get?
I think I got the not Will Ferrell. Who's the other guy?
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's mine, but it'll be fine. December 13th is Decades Day. I've been waiting for this one. I actually met with the student leadership and pushed this one because I'll be shooting for late 80s ish. I've been waiting 30 years to tight roll my jeans again, so I'll be looking forward to that. I may even break out my Letterman's jacket. I think it still fits for Decades Day. And then the last one, December 20th, is Color Day. Each grade level is assigned a color. I did not write down the colors. I apologize, but it will be in the weekly newsletter. Each grade level has its own color, and staff has its own color as well. I think we are gray, so not all that exciting, but I'm pretty sure I can come up with something gray. We also just finished a successful clothing drive. I think I talked about
Yep.
this. Gia Riley, one of our fifth graders, approached me wanting to do a clothing drive. We just finished that up, and I'm happy to report, I believe we overfilled a pickup truck full of clothing that was delivered to Katie's closet on last Friday, and those clothes will eventually work their way into hands of children in need across the Commonwealth. So big props to Gia Riley for coming up with, and her selflessness and coming up with that thought at this time of year. And if I can jump ahead a little bit in the agenda, if that's all right, while
Yep.
I'm on a roll. In the drive are a couple of photos. At our October meeting, you approved the placement of the Couture Field sign. Couture Field. That has been placed, as you can see in those pictures. And if you don't mind, I will read some words that Captain Matt Armitage, who was instrumental in getting this done, had written in an email. Thank you all for your support over the past few years as we work towards making this a reality. Couture Field, the baseball field behind Howe Manning, is named and dedicated in memory of Sergeant Ed Couture. years and years ago, and although there was a small plaque memorializing such, the field was routinely still referred to as Howe Manning Field. Yesterday, November 20th, a sign was installed at the field that will hopefully remind everyone of the name of the field, and more importantly, of the man the field was named after. So those photos are there. It looks fantastic. It looks like it's always been there. They did a great job with it, so thank you for that.
Awesome.
And that is all I have.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, one, I was going to speak briefly to the traffic, but I could check that box. We did that. And that's been an ongoing thing. I will say the thought we have around sort of a simple fix that we can do temporarily is probably the most realistic thing that, I mean, we weren't able to come up with that without the support of Ken. So I think it was really helpful to sit down and have him sort of draw a picture of something that might potentially work for a short term, because we were coming up kind of blank. So I'm excited about that. Maybe that's the wrong word. I don't know, fill in the blank.
Hopeful, yeah.
I'm hopeful about that. That's a good word. So, just a brief update. We've been doing the coaching with the Hill for literacy folks. I know Peggy works really hard to make this happen. So they have been coming in and working with one grade level at a time for an entire day. They model a lesson. Teachers sit in a fishbowl, including me. We watch. We get to ask questions. Then I step back. They go off with the teachers for the day into different classrooms. They get to watch the teacher do a lesson, give feedback. It's a day-long sort of journey with each of the grade levels that has been really a positive experience, and everybody has spoken favorably. And teachers are really getting the support they need in order to do some of this small group instruction and some of the work that they've been asked to do. So that's been great. Coming up, there's Cara from the Hill is coming in, and she's actually going to do some walkthroughs with the principals, which I will appreciate because she helps us sort of have the lens for what it is we're looking for. And I appreciate all the work that's being done. So that's coming up soon, and I'm looking forward to that journey. I have to say, based on my own experience with grandchildren and friends and colleagues in other districts, we're really doing a remarkable job with this. I mean, I'm proud to work here, and I think Peggy should be really proud of the work she's doing. So I feel good about that. We have an upcoming Fuller Meadow safety meeting. I know that Jeff was able to do sort of an Alice drill at Howe Manning. We're looking at doing the same thing. It would be with the staff only after school at like a faculty meeting. It's very tricky to do a legit drill with 5, 6, 7-year-olds without hoping that they'd actually come to school the next day after you do something like that. So we're going to be doing an Alice drill at some point. I'll keep you up to date on how that goes. Look forward to doing that. And lastly, the Discovery Museum is coming this week. They've been coming for each one of our grades. They're great. They do a focus when they push into classrooms on a particular skill, and this time they're talking about how sound moves. And it's amazing how developmentally appropriate they can be with 5, 6, and 7-year-olds to get them to understand something that's a very abstract concept. So it's how sound moves and that how that helps us communicate. So if you happen to have a first grader, you know anybody who does, they'll be talking more about that. And they've really enjoyed coming here, and we've enjoyed having them. And that's sponsored by the PTO in Richmond. That's how they orchestrate. So unless you have questions, I think I'm brief as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I don't believe there are any gifts and grants this month.
Jen, you guys, were there any on your end? I know we had Ray Gooley last month on gifts and grants, but I didn't know.
No.
I didn't have any, but I didn't know if you did.
Nope. None.
Okay.
Great.
So now we're just going to go through some recent updates from the policy subcommittee, which Dave is our rep for. Scott's just going to put everything up on the smart board so anybody watching can follow along.
Great. Yeah, so a couple of updates. So we had our recent policy subcommittee. As Michelle said, Dave sits on the team for Middleton, and it's Candace in Topsfield and Stephanie Bonapane, right, from Oxford. Yeah. So 3 folks, and the policy sub does the work. So we can kind of do a lot of the heavy lifting at the subcommittee level, and then bring recommendations to each of the individual committees to see how they want to proceed with those recommendations. So at our last meeting, We spent time going through policies that MASC is recommending for removal from the policy book. They're either redundant or they're captured somewhere else in the policy book. It only needs to be in one spot, not two, so on and so forth. So we'll go through these. We can answer questions as we go along. I think maybe the best way to go through, Michelle, is to kind of explain them first, and then we can maybe retake them. If the committee decides that they would like to take the action that the policy subcommittee is recommending. If we do take any action tonight, for those of you who are newer to the committee, what we would want to do is waive policy BGB, because policy BGB is the policy that we use to adjust and edit policies or eliminate policies. And the way that policy is written, you have to go through 3 meetings in order to do that. And, that seems to be for the elimination of some policies or simple changes. That seems to be a little bit arduous when you think we have 3 committees. That would be 9 meetings before any action would be taken on a policy. So we would waive BGB if the committee decides to take any of the recommendations from the policy subcommittee tonight. And so we'll go to section A. So in the drive, you'll have the different sections. And section A has 3 policies that I want to point out to you. One is Boxford, one is Middleton, one is Topsfield. They're old mission and vision policies. You can see that the Boxford one, if you click on that one, is from 2004, what the core values were and the mission statement was. And then the Middleton one in the middle there is from 2003, and then last updated in 2010, and sort of what the overall mission of the Middleton Public Schools are. And then the Topsfield one is from 2001. And so the general feeling was that, A, these are old, right? Some of them are almost 20 years old. And the committee and I, when we discussed it, we thought it'd be good just for us to have sort of a tri-town vision and mission that we built on our goals of the school committee, built on the pillars that we have, and built on the vision statement. And so the goal would be to eliminate these from the policy book, and then we would work on, the policy sub would work on developing sort of a mission and vision statement to bring back to the individual committees for them to look at. We could adopt it as a Middleton mission vision, Boxford mission vision, Topsfield mission vision, or we could adopt it as a Tri-Town School Union mission vision, which is the way we kind of operate now. We have our overall vision statement and we have our pillars. So the committee thought that these policies are old and need to be updated, we would remove them and then come up and work as a team on a new mission and vision statement. So that's the A policies. If you go to section B, section B has 2 in there. One is BEDH, which is our public comment policy. And at our last meeting, we spent a little bit of time on this, and we brought it to all 3 committees, and one committee had another idea, and another committee had another idea, and it was like, oh, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. And then that developed sort of a new policy for us to think about and consider. One of the things that I do like that came out of it, I can't remember, Michelle, if it was you or Charisse, but like on the agenda, where it says remarks from the public, for all 3 towns, we will hyperlink the remarks from the public comment policy, That way, it's there for everybody to see. When the agenda gets posted, you can click on it, it takes you right out to that policy. So for this one, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle. She actually had a few more thoughts and edits that she wanted to run by the committee. Michelle was the one who sort of first said, hey, can we take a look at this? Came to the policy subcommittee. She had some thoughts with the policy subcommittee. The policy subcommittee agreed. We went out to all 3 committees. Some little more edits were added along the way, and then I think, Michelle, you have some new thoughts for tonight that you wanted to present to the committee as well.
Yes, so the version that you're seeing in the drive right now is an edited version that I had sort of redlined. What's in yellow and highlighted is what I think, Scott, I think you had added in there, saying that we needed some verbiage in there if the meeting was on Zoom.
Yeah, that came out of the Topsfield meeting, I think. Yep.
If the meeting's on Zoom, basically this says that in order to sign up for public comment, we'll use the chat feature. Once the meeting is called to order, the chat feature will come down, and we'll just go to first come, first serve basis on who gets to speak first during public comment. I chose to remove the sentence that says the public comment segment shall not exceed 15 minutes because the sentence after that kind of contradicted it, saying the presiding chair may permit extension of this time limit in extenuating circumstances. So it's kind of vague in what somebody can define as an extenuating circumstance. It's an objective term. So to keep things streamlined, I thought we could remove the time limit entirely. But in the next section, paragraph 2, it says speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to present their material and must begin their comments by stating their name, city and town. If more than 7 people sign up, the time limit will drop to 2 minutes. I removed the 1 minute option, thinking that 1 minute probably wasn't enough time. And the reason why I chose 7 people is because if we had 6 people sign up or 7 people sign up and we gave them only 2 minutes, that's still less than 15 minutes. So if we have 7 and assuming that they all speak for 3 minutes, they may not. We're still at 21 minutes, you know, and we often go over our time limit on agenda items quite often. So I didn't think that, you know, extending it to 21 minutes would be that big of a deal. But if we have the sign-up sheet ahead of time and, you know, we know if 8 people sign up, okay, public comment will then be 16 minutes. I don't think I've been here at a meeting, even when the room was full, when we had more than 10 people sign up. You know, and even if we do have 10 people sign up, that's 20 minutes, you know. So I'm willing to take feedback on that, depending on what you guys think. And then stating no one will be denied the opportunities to submit their public comment, whether verbally or in writing. And then I kind of just took out the verbiage on whether or not time is available, because the way this reads, time should be available for everyone. So those were just the changes that I made based on our conversation from last month. But I'm open to discussion and willing to take some feedback.
I have a couple of things. So I apologize, I missed the last 2 meetings, but I did go back and watch the meeting, so I'm sort of, I guess, up to date. I have a couple of suggestions, changes that we could make. The first one would be to move public comment to the end of the meeting. I think when things are really hot, it sets a really bad vibe in the room, and it's not really great to have to sit here for 2 more hours and be like, well, that was really awful, and now we have to actually conduct business. So I'd like to move it to the end.
Just one thought on that too, Natasha.
Sure.
Michelle and I were talking when we were just going over the agenda for the meeting, and one of the benefits of that, and I've seen some districts do this, it may actually answer some public comment questions. Like when you get through the meeting,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, the school committee talked about that.
Right.
I don't have a public comment anymore because we are not going to do fees for the hockey team or whatever. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Right.
So there is a benefit to that.
Right. Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. Also, I'd like it to be Middleton residents only. We had a couple meetings here where it was people from I don't know where. But I guess my question would be, if you don't live here, why are you yelling at us about things going on in our own town? I would like to, I know there was an SJC ruling, I think it was in May. I would love to have our legal counsel, I've heard different people say, well, with the SJC ruling, you can do whatever you want. Like, the person can say anything, there's really nothing you can do about it. And I get that too. I mean, I love the First Amendment. I think it's fantastic. However, I think that we should legally have Mike weigh in and give us the parameters. What is protected speech? Where is the line? Because what you think is the line might not be what I think is the line. And that goes for behavior as well. Like, is it pointing at someone? Is it kicking a chair? Is it like, what is the line? I would love to legally know what it is, not your perception of it, not my perception of it, not your perception, like to have a lawyer actually say, no, this is the line, here it is, so that we're all on the same page. I'm trying to think. I think that's it.
Okay. So in terms of moving public comment to the end, I'm not opposed to that. I think it just will depend on what is on the agenda. Because if we're potentially voting on something during that meeting, I think it's fair to have somebody weigh in or give their comment before we vote, in case they I don't know, give us any new information that we may not have had. There will be times when I think it does make sense to have public comment at the end. And I think it might be to the chair's discretion based on what's on the agenda for that month.
Oh, that just came into my head. So, I guess the verbiage at the chair's discretion, I would like to, this is again, like a legal question for Mike. Oh no.
He's got some feedback on the
Oh my
public comment
gosh,
policy.
Howie, if you didn't like my ideas, you could just.
Sure.
Oh, sure, come on my feet.
Yeah, opened up your bag there. So at the discretion of the chair. So it's funny, I was watching a town meeting, not the big town meeting, one of the boards. I was watching a meeting from a couple months ago, and there was a discussion about a ruling being, or sorry, behavior being at the will of the chair. And one person made a really good point. Like, she talked about like potty jokes, like bathroom humor. What you think is funny, I might think is offensive. So to leave things to the discretion of the chair, like you might not find a comment threatening that I do, or vice versa. And so I guess my question, probably more for Mike, would be like, can you make the policy so that, say you walk into a room where it's like really heated, and we've all been in that situation, can the chair say, like, I'd like to forgo public comment tonight. I'd like to, poll the board and see how the board feels, so that it's less about one person. And totally no knock to you, but in 5 years from now, probably, I don't think any of us will probably be on this board.
Yeah.
So we're thinking, farther ahead than just today. I don't know, it's just something that, having lived through the last however many years that I've been on this board, it's just sort of things that would have made me feel more comfortable, I think, in hindsight. Like, if we had all been able to say, I feel fine, I think it's gonna be fine, or like, I don't feel comfortable in this situation. I'd love to find out, again, legally, because it's all about, are you allowed to do that? Is that constitutionally correct? But I think it would be good to ask those questions and see what we get.
I can set up something with Mike for, Dave and myself as policy sub and Michelle as chair, and get those questions answered for sure. And
Yeah.
I think one too, Natasha, that popped in my head was, I don't know if it can just be Middleton residents.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask.
I'd have to ask.
Yeah, okay.
But it's a fair question to ask.
Okay.
For sure, it's a Middleton meeting.
Sure.
But it's a public meeting. But yeah, I know what you're referencing and referring to, sure.
Yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
I think it's important maybe to have Mike hear in on this.
Yeah, for sure.
And just before we put the policy into place.
Yeah, I think, and that was one tonight, we were not gonna, tonight was the one of like, let's present it, let's hear the feedback, and then what I wanna do is like, I have Topsfield Thursday, hey, here was some of the conversation of the Topsfield meeting. And then I have Boxford next Wednesday, hey, here was some of the conversation of the Topsfield and Middleton meeting. Swing back around with the public comment policy in January and see if we can't come to some conclusion on it. So I'll try to get something on the books with Mike, a Zoom or something for the three of us. And I've got all the questions here from Natasha. Natasha, even if you want to write them up,
Sure.
in case I missed anything.
Yeah, awesome.
And then we'll,
Thank you.
like, just email them to me, and then when we sit with Mike, we'll ask those questions for sure.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing, I appreciate everybody's feedback, and I don't want to word this so it's so tight that we have no flexibility, and I don't want to kind of, find ourselves stuck in a corner when we do want to change something for a meeting, and just to have like a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah, so maybe Mike can advise us on that, like,
Yeah,
so that we're not locked in to,
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's a policy that's gonna be carried on for a long time, and I think it's one of those policies that like affects this committee, affects
Yeah.
the meetings, the tones of the meetings and all that other stuff, so I think it's like really important that we vet it out.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll be one we'll just put a pin in tonight, but good
Okay.
feedback, and like I said, I'll talk to Topsfield Thursday, Boxford next Wednesday, and then we'll swing back around.
Okay, so when we waive BGB, we can exclude this one?
For sure.
Okay,
We won't even bring it to a motion.
right,
Yeah.
okay.
So then staying in the drive,
I have a question
Oh,
on
yeah.
the
Sorry, Joe.
policy. There's a couple of things. Is there anything going to be put in there if, I know my second meeting on this school committee, we had a problem meeting. What if someone's behavior in the room is out of line? Is there going to be something in there, how we deal with that? So if we have any behavior in the room that's out of line, something so that we're not looking back on it, or we're not looking at it while it's happening, we know what happened. Someone gets asked to behave properly in the room, to watch the language, watch the behavior, all the way up to if we have to ask them to leave a meeting. Shouldn't there be something in this that if anything gets out of hand, how we're going to handle it beforehand?
Yeah, I mean, I think that should potentially be in there. I know at other meetings that I've seen in town, people have been asked to leave. I don't know if that's written into any sort of policy, if they're,
Well, if we're going to go to
Yeah.
Mike, we should at least have
Right,
like,
yep.
I think
like
that's something, Mike.
what we're
Yeah.
legally, we asked them to leave once, we asked them, they don't want to leave, just so our meetings don't get out of hand and we're not sitting here. And my other question is, if we come up with something, whether it's this policy or down the line, I brought something up at the last meeting, and I'm new to the school committee. If we feel strongly about something and it goes to the other two towns and it doesn't make its way back in there, we should be allowed to have the policy on its own in Middleton if it doesn't pass. And I don't know if that would ever happen, but I just want to clear it for my own peace of mind.
yeah.
That is clear, Joe. You are correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think when we were going over the, what is it, the A policies?
Yeah.
Scott had said that
One was Middleton, one was Topsfield.
one was Middleton,
Boxford.
one was Topsfield, one was Boxford, and we, in updating these vision statements, it doesn't have to be one policy for each, for the tri-town. We can have our own,
Okay,
yeah.
okay,
The highway policies. are an
Exactly.
example of that, right?
Like you think of the highway
Yeah.
policy, like that's a Middleton-only policy.
okay.
And I would say to you, if the other two towns got a dog though, I would say to them, we already did a lot of the work. Let's look at the highway policy, let's not start from scratch.
Okay.
But each town is, at the end of the day, we're still three individual towns. And so if we came up with three different public comment policies, which I don't think that will end as three different policies, but it would be three different policies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to at least bring that to Mike, if there is a problem at a meeting, just so we know ahead of time how we're gonna handle something.
Yeah.
So we're not getting stuck again where things get a little out of hand on a subject that might come up, and everyone's kind of looking, not knowing what to do. I'd like to see something in there that says how we deal with something if it gets out of bounds.
Joe, just the same request I had to Natasha as well, because I want to make sure we're asking the exact right question to Mike.
Yeah.
Can you send me an email?
Yeah.
And just put a list of the things that you want us to check with Mike?
Okay.
And then that way I didn't misinterpret or write a question down wrong or whatever the case may be.
Great.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Anything else on that one? All right. Staying in the Bs, BK. This one, they're recommending removal because it's like stating the obvious. The school committee may maintain memberships at the national, state, and regional school committee associations as budgeted. It may also maintain institutional memberships. It's a stating the obvious policy. It's not really needed. We have a budget line for memberships and things like that. So this was one that they recommended that you could remove because, again, it's stating the obvious. If you go to the C section, or section C, CHCA. And CHCA is actually, the title of it's interesting. It's approval of handbooks and directives. It's really not about the approval of handbooks and directives. It's about language that would have to do with any student who is found on school premises or at a school-sponsored or school-related event in possession of a dangerous weapon or controlled substance may be subject from expulsion. And then it talks about expulsion and what that looks like and so on and so forth. In talking with MASC, this is all captured in state law. It's rooted in state law. It's not something you would need a policy on because it's literally, you can see the state law on the bottom is 7137H. And there's actually been a new state law, 7137H and 3/4, which talks about these kinds of things. And so because it's rooted in law, it's saying to remove it as it's unnecessary. It's also covered in section J, which is the policy around student discipline. So it's already baked into the policy J section. So that's CHCA. If you go to the folder for G, the G section, there's three here. GA is personnel policy goals. And then this is talking about the school committee realizes that even though it's no longer involved in the process of hiring school district employees other than the superintendent, assistant superintendent, business manager, special ed, and health personnel, and it gives what the goals would be. So the hiring happens at the school level, as we know, and we have an HR department now. And the feedback is, these are specific to the districts, these are procedures that would be specific to district hiring, human resources department, so on and so forth. So it's not something that would necessarily be rooted in a school committee policy, because this would be all rooted in the work that Brian does as our HR director. Connected to that, GCQD is a policy on the resignation of professional and support staff members. This is all captured in contracts. It's in collective bargaining agreements, it's in individual contracts for members. So again, it's already captured in a contractual process. It's not something that you would need a policy on in terms of the resignation. This would all go through the Human Resources Department. Same thing for GCQE, retirement of professional staff members. Annually, the superintendent will inform the committee of the staff members who have indicated as their intention to retire. We do that all the time. It's a policy that's in the teacher's contract, so you don't necessarily need a policy on retirement of professional staff members. We do that annually through the budget process when we know you guys are made aware, because that obviously has budget implications. Section J, and again, I'm just doing a kind of a quick overview of these, and then we can certainly jump into any questions as we go back to look at them. JKA is about corporal punishment, and it says that state law provides that the power of the school committee or any teacher or other employee or agent of the committee to maintain discipline on school property shall not include the right to inflict corporal punishment. This is shocking, but Dave and I looked this up and we had a policy sub. It's still allowed in some states. I mean, if you Google what states are corporal punishment still allowed in, it was not like one or two. I remember being at several.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like a dozen.
Yeah, I think it was quite a few. So we're not saying take this out, okay? We're not saying, what's happening is, if you go to the policy next to it, which is policy JKAA, they want to include it in the physical restraint policy, right? We have a policy on physical restraint, and you can see in red there, that line from JKA, so get rid of JKA, take that language and put it in JKAA, which is the exact same language. The policy of the school committee or any teacher, employee of agent of the committee to maintain discipline shall not include the right to inflict corporal punishment upon any student. So we're eliminating JKA only because they want to park it in the right policy, which would be the policy on physical restraint. And then last one is in section K. It's KCB, and this is a policy called community involvement in decision making. There's actually a better policy on this, which is BDF, where you can have advisory committees to the school committee. And so this policy, KCB, talks about having community input. Citizens are encouraged to express ideas and concerns. Residents who are qualified because of interest in training and expertise will be encouraged to assume an active role if the committee wanted to take that input. And so there's a separate policy called BDF, which you can see right on there, Advisory Committee to the School Committee. And that policy encompasses all of these things. So reasons why districts would form an advisory committee. If we were a big enough district, you've seen in some districts, like in big cities or towns, where they have to redistrict kids, right? Because we got to redraw the maps because there's too many kids at one school. You pull an advisory committee together of the neighborhoods and like have the conversation. In 2016, all three committees decided to have an advisory committee on the selection of a superintendent. They didn't want to go out to a firm and spend the $25,000 or whatever it costs to have an outside firm run a superintendent search. And so they formed an advisory committee of community members, like, hey, who in the community runs HR shops, and who in the community does this? And so that was an advisory committee to the school committee. So that's all captured in BDF, and so that's the reason why MASC is saying, you know what, you can take KCB out because it's all captured already in BDF. So those are the policies up for you guys to, if you want to take the recommendation of the policy subcommittee. All three policy subcommittee members agreed that removal or transfer of that JKA into JKAA made sense. And so if it's the will of the committee to, if we go back to A, to eliminate ADM, you wouldn't touch the box within Topsfield policy, but to eliminate ADM, the first thing you do is have a policy that would waive BGB. Someone would make a motion to remove ADM from the policy book. That would go through the process. Once BGB is already said once, it's fine. We would then skip public comment because we know we're going to circle back around on that. We would go to BK. Is it the will of the committee to remove BK from the policy book, which again was stating the obvious about school committee memberships. And then we go right down the line with each one of those.
So we can't do it all in one.
We got to take them one by one. I know it's tedious, but that's what policy work is Dave is learning from all the subcommittee meetings. Yes.
You guys like it?
So
Dave had a full head of hair when he joined.
he did actually. Yeah. He was like Barry Gibb. He was exactly. And I just
Okay.
dated myself with that reference.
So before we waive BGB, is there any discussion on any of these policies that are being recommended to be removed? I think that they're all pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Committee felt the same way.
Yeah. Okay. So would anyone like to make a motion to waive policy BGB?
I will make that motion.
I will second that motion.
All in favor of waiving policy BGB, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay, so we will start with the A policies. Would anyone like to make a motion to remove policy ADM from the policy book?
I will make the motion to remove policy ADM.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all in favor of removing policy ADM, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay. So,
BK would be nice.
okay. Would anyone like to make a motion to remove policy BK from the policy book?
I'll make the motion to remove BK from the policy book.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor to remove policy BK, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? C. Okay. I'll make the motion to remove policy CHCA-E from the policy book.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Go back to G. So it's three Gs.
Yeah, GA, GCQD, and GCQE.
Okay. I will make a motion to remove policy GA from the policy book.
I'll second the motion to remove GA from the policy book.
All in favor of removing policy GA, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? I'll make the motion to remove policy GCQD from the policy book. You can
I'll
second.
second
Just
that
make
motion.
Colleen's job easier.
Exactly.
Second the job.
Yeah, stay.
Okay. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any nays? Okay. I'll make the motion to remove policy GCQE from the policy book.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Okay. Okay, policy, the J policies. So I'll make the motion to remove policy JKA from the policy book.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, and now this one is to be adding or
As
amending.
listed, yeah, amend the policy as
Okay.
written in the drive. Yeah.
I'll make the motion to amend the policy as written of policy JKAA.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? We're getting there. I'll make the motion to remove policy KCB from the policy book.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Only hundreds more policies to go, Dave.
Oh, this is exciting stuff.
Exciting stuff. All right, if it's okay with the chair, we can move on to a curriculum and student services update. Peggy and Matt. I'll put it up on the drive, up on the screen. Yep.
So this is really an update on the presentation that we gave to you earlier this fall about the work that we've been doing. We have joint meetings between all of the special ed coordinators and the curriculum coordinators in the Tri-Town. And if you go to the next slide there, this is the using data process that we've been using. It's originally out of Turk. It's a well-regarded process for analyzing data to really look at this. The conversation originally was generated around sort of questions that were being asked about the achievement gap between students with disabilities and non-disabled students on the MCAS. And so we've kind of taken this opportunity to have broader conversations, and this process really does support that. So when we met with you last, we said that we were in the verifying causes stage. We had generated several possible causes for the achievement gap, and we're kind of exploring those. So when you are doing the verifying causes stage, you want to do some research, which we had done some research around that. You also want to look at data. So the next step that we've been working on since we last spoke is really this idea of gathering that local data to verify that the causes apply in the TTU. Because just because something might be true in the research doesn't necessarily mean that it's locally true, and you want to verify that it is locally true before you spend any time trying to solve something. Otherwise, you might be putting a lot of energy into solving something that isn't the real problem. and therefore wouldn't really solve the problem. So the verifying causes stage is one of the most time-consuming parts of this process, so that's really where we've been focusing our attention since our last meeting. I was going to talk about the next part.
So, as Peggy said, one of the things that we really want to make a focus on is that our conversations and our focus is really what's happening in Tri-Town and what's happening in Middleton, right? So we've done a lot of research and had a lot of conversations about different trends and national trends. What is, I think, really beneficial about the timing of our conversations too is that we have a whole nother set of MCAS data as well. Since we started these conversations, we really started in the spring with the previous year's MCAS. Now we have the fall 23. The spring of 23 MCAS data, and we can look at those numbers as well and incorporate it into our discussion. So this has really led to fruitful and really in-depth conversations, I think, about just programming as a whole, which is what it really should be, right? I mean, we talk all the time that different metrics are really important on their own, and then the programming as a whole is really what the most important piece is. So as we looked at some of those trends that we wanted to talk about, we wanted to do that local data collection to say, okay, now that we have some of these discussion points and some of these causes, quote unquote, we want to make sure that we dive into our local data. So this really just talks about what we're focusing on just as now the Tri-Town in Middleton. When we look at this next slide is really what kinds of training have we been doing for our special educators over the past several years, right? Is there a correlation? This is where the data piece really comes in, and we've flushed out some really significant data. Like, is there a correlation between the service delivery model and the student achievement? And what we mean by that really is, the different methods of instruction when it comes to inclusion services, pull-out services, whether a student gets some inclusion and some pull-out direct instruction. Do they get a lot more pull-out direct instruction? Are they in the classroom and inclusion all day long? And what does that mean for that individual student? What does that mean for their performance? Really a correlation, is there a correlation between the instructional methods used with the student achievement? And that's, again, about the curriculum and about the training that the teachers have. And then disability type. That's something that, I typically report out to the committee over the years is, percentage of students that are eligible for special ed services, but also there's been times where I've also talked about the percentage of students with specific learning disabilities, the percentages of students with autism, with, communication disabilities. And so we've really taken a deeper dive into, is there a correlation that we're seeing in our programming between students with communication disabilities and how they're performing, or other disability, specific performances? So that's where we're diving deep into the local data. Just as a brief kind of reminder example of what we talked about in the fall too, about the PD piece, which I think is a significant finding that we're really focusing on as well. This was a slide that we did show to you a couple months ago in the fall, and it was really talking about how we're working on kind of a foundation of training that we want all of our special ed teachers to have, not when they enter the district. If they have it, that's fantastic, but kind of a foundation of training that we can provide them over time so that we have consistency for what all of our kids are getting. So this was one that you saw. The next one just has been the additional layers that we've added to that, just to flesh it out a little bit more. I think at the time of the presentation we said, here's the top layer of what we want for PD. This is how we're going to get a little bit deeper. So you can see here about kind of the additional layers of the reading training. Orton Gillingham is kind of an overarching approach in professional development that we want for all of our teachers. But then you can look down here. This, we have 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, we have 6 different very specialized programs that will also be utilized and are utilized. All of these are already currently utilized in the district. It's making sure that we have enough staff trained in all of these different programs, and then ensuring that the teachers that are trained in these programs are working with the kids that require this type of programming, right? So you can see here that one overarching reading kind of instruction piece of it breaks down into, this is the 6 that we kind of teased out as really important specialized training pieces to it. And then the next one is just really about the math. And as you can see here, and Peggy's going to talk about this on the next slide, there's fewer for math, right? Multi-sensory math, again, overarching training in conversations that we want to have, and then under that there's more specific programs like Wooden Math is a very specific curriculum program, Touch Math is a specific program, Key Math. So this is just a follow-up. So the kind of two facets to what I just talked about. One is that, continue to do that deep dive into the specific data of our students in the Tri-Town, in Middleton, Boxford, and Topsfield in regards to those criteria of disability type, instructional type, and curriculum type. And then this is just a follow-up to what we talked about a couple months ago in regards to getting deeper into the training part of it. You'll see here, and I think it's going to be mentioned in a minute, but before we go from this slide, like I said, there's far more reading pieces above, there's less math available, and even so, you can see that the touch math is kind of shaded in a different color. The reason why we shaded that is that because it is an additional layer of math training. That is a very, very specific math program that serves just a small number of students. So the other things that we're talking about can serve maybe a larger number of students. That touch math piece is just used with a very, very small amount of students. So
a couple of the trends that we're interested in exploring a little bit more is just even visually, you can see that there's less available for math. And frankly, there's less research out there around math. The reading has so much research attached to it. And there is research around math, but it's less robust than the research around ELA. And therefore, the options that exist for thinking about specialized instruction in math are just more limited than they are in reading. But we're wondering, are there some things that are unexplored for us? Are there some things that have been developed perhaps that we're not familiar with that but might be helpful for us to introduce with our students? So just kind of even just seeing that difference between the types of training our teachers have had or even the types of curriculum programs that are available to address issues with students who have disabilities in the area of math. We wanted to explore that a little bit more. So that's kind of, when we talked earlier this year, we talked about as we go through this using data process, we'd be spending a lot of time in verifying causes. And after we were kind of sure that there was something to this, then we were going to be kind of moving things along into that pipeline of generating solutions. So that's one of the things that we can see that there's just less for math, and we want to see if there's something else. So we're going to be moving on kind of like doing some research about that and figuring out if there's something more that we could do there. The other thing we're really interested in, and this is one of the benefits, I guess, of the Tri-Town in the sense that while programming is similar or approaches are similar in the Tri-Town, they're not identical. And there are some differences in like types of programs that people, and I'm talking about curriculum tools here, that are used within special ed among the towns. And so we're curious, and when we started to look at our data, we started off by looking at MCAS, but we folded in all of our universal screening data as well, so we have a second data point that we're able to see for students. And we're asking ourselves, and one of the nice things about both the MCAS and the universal screening is that we can see the growth of students. And for special ed, that's really critical because the absolute performance is, connected in some ways to their disability, but it's their growth that we're really interested in because that tells us whether or not what we're doing is having the expected impact on closing that gap for those students. So we want to ask ourselves, or what we're looking at when we're looking at the data, so say a student is getting, you saw like there are like 6 different programs under ELA that you could possibly do that are specific curriculum programs. So when we see students who are getting Wilson, for example, what kind of achievement and growth are we seeing from students who are getting Wilson as opposed to students who are getting some of the other things that are on that list? And are we seeing, just looking at our own research across the Tri-Town, so almost our own little R&D here, are we seeing that one might be stronger than another? And if that's the case, would we consider then making that something that we would do first or kind of prioritize for our students? And so that's, we're really thinking if we can triangulate all of those pieces, and we've started this conversation, there's more data for us to examine to look at that. We think it might help inform kind of where we choose to go in terms of prioritizing our training. So that leads us to the next slide here. We do anticipate starting to move some of this into that next phase here, which also requires its own data and research, which is why this process goes on for so long. But we are looking at that idea of teacher training. So if we do discover, for example, that some of them seem to have stronger results than others, then rather than thinking about training people in all 6 of those areas, maybe we would be highlighting a particular tool or 2 and making sure that we do that training first. Not to say that we wouldn't want teachers to have that broader training, but there's only so much time. And if we're seeing that certain things are having a greater impact, then it would be important to make sure that that's where we strengthen our training first. So we're looking to prioritize that training and coming up with a plan for that, kind of based on the data that we're seeing from our students. We do want to, as I've already said, look at that there are other options for specialized instruction in math and do the research around that. And the third bucket is there are some differences in the instructional delivery models between the three towns. So again, is there some evidence that would suggest one might be stronger than another? And then how might that inform how we might refine the instructional delivery models that we're using in the Tri-Town? So we anticipate that we'll probably have 3 subgroups going within our committee that would each be kind of taking on one of those topics and doing additional research, possibly some additional data collection to be able to move that a little bit further into an action plan for addressing some of those pieces.
In terms of teacher training, with the additional PD days that you guys have now, do you feel like there's enough time and enough training time?
So the nature of those types of trainings, I mean, some are as short as like a 1-session thing, which could be done in a PD day, but others are entire courses, like 30 hours. So they would never be taking place during that time anyway, because it would not be possible to deliver it. And so the extra PD time is definitely helpful, but it's not going to address all of these needs. There would probably still be some needs for teachers to pursue some of this for graduate credit, or for us to be providing sub-release for teachers to be trained in those various areas.
There's never enough time, right? I mean, even for our kids, like I'd love to, in like the perfect world of education, I mean, I think about everything has changed in education, right? Curriculum, assessment, instruction, the needs of the kids, the diversity of our learners, right? But the one thing that hasn't changed is it's 180 and 6.5 or 7, right? It's like everything has changed except for the container, right? The container that we use is the same exact container, and when you think of all that's been added to the container, it's no longer a gallon, right? And so, I would love public ed, this is beyond Middleton, right? This is just a deeper conversation around public education. Like, is there a way to expand that school year, right? Is there a way to expand it for teachers? Is there a way to expand it for staff? Is there a way to, but the whole world is built around the school calendar, right? Summer camps are built around the school calendar, right? Like dental appointments are built around, like the school calendar is like in the middle of it, and then everything has grown outside of it. And so to make a change, it changes everything, right? When you think about that, but that's the conversation we often have internally, is just when we start to think big about public ed and differences and changes, and these things would all cost money, obviously, but this idea of increasing the learning for our kids, increasing the learning for staff, having the ability to do those things would be tremendous for sure.
I know we have the results from the MCATs, and I remember seeing that the growth, both from regular students to special ed students, was the same, right? So that means that the growth was similar, which means that we're doing a good job. What's the tool that you use to gauge like individual classrooms, and what is it that you take? Surveys, you take?
So we have universal screeners. So we use AIMSweb for K-6 math, and we use MClass for K-3 literacy, and then AIMSweb for 4-6 literacy.
Yeah.
So that does give us some additional data. We also have another tool called the growth measure that we can use in connection with our math program. And that also gives us some data about how our students are performing. So there are just other assessment tools that aren't MCAS that are a little bit more timely and a little bit more connected to our curriculum that we also use to determine how students are progressing. So there are, particularly on the universal screeners, there are expected benchmarks that students are supposed to reach, and as they go through the year, those benchmarks continue to rise. And so we would be looking to see how our students are doing in connection with those kind of growing benchmarks.
Is that done on a classroom level or a grade level?
Well, it's done for all kids.
All
So,
kids.
and when you're talking about the universal screeners, there are different subtests that are grade appropriate. So not every grade level has the same subtests. Like a kindergartner would be focused a lot on very early skills. A 6th grader would be tested on something entirely different in ELA. But they would be getting tested on skills that are appropriate for their grade level and the expectations at that grade level.
Because I found interesting that you said that you can take those examples from those tests and implement for things that are working, right? Things that are working. Do you get that from a classroom, from a specific teacher or program, or?
From these assessments, these core assessments that we're talking about, they cut across all classrooms. So every child is taking these assessments, so that gives us really good comparative data. Okay. And we're asking all of the kids, I think in 2nd grade, not to take the growth measure. It's not a particularly appropriate assessment for the youngest grades, but it's an additional data point that it's universal. So classroom-based assessments are helpful from a teacher standpoint in terms of like informing their instruction, but aren't as helpful for looking kind of across sections. So you want something that's a little bit more standardized if you're looking across sections. So that's why those universal screeners are more helpful for this kind of a discussion, because they're the same assessment administered in the same way. It's a little bit more reliable data to make these types of judgments.
But it also helps you make a judgment on the curriculum, right? Is the best curriculum moving forward, is what's working, what's not working.
Yeah, I mean, we are hoping that it will give us some insight into that in terms of like, it's a limited data set that we're talking about here, but if we see that, wow, and, and I'm just going to throw it out and just making this up, right? But if we look at Wilson and we're like, oh, look at this, like every child who's doing Wilson has above average growth, then we're like, that's a good thing to do, as opposed to something else that maybe they're not getting the same type of growth. That helps us to decide like how we might pair. And it has to do with their disability as well. Like Wilson wouldn't be appropriate for every child. It wouldn't be meeting their needs. But we're trying to use the data to figure out if there are certain things that we already use as a district that are higher leverage points when it comes to creating that student growth, and could we put those into play more broadly? Those are the types of questions we're asking ourselves. And then there may be things beyond us as well, right, that we don't know about yet that we want to explore.
One of the examples is what happened with Haggerty.
Yeah.
So in the primary grades, the phonemic awareness piece, there was a dramatic change after that was implemented, to the point where every classroom teacher, when we have our data meetings, can see it. And they're like, look at, that was such a grassroots kind of realization they all came to, and how profound it was. So, they're talking specifically about special ed, but you're also asking on a broader scale. So when we have those data meetings, that's where those conversations happen.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and historically, I mean, I wasn't here at the time, but like when foundations gotten put in place, that was also a data-driven decision of realizing that the data was suggesting kids were not as strong in their phonics skills, and so they implemented a structured curriculum that would address that, right? So looking at data like that does help us to make informed decisions about the types of curricular solutions that we need to have in place.
Okay, thank you.
And then I think just as an added point to that, it just, for some of the newer committee members or people listening, we also have to remember that students on IEPs are on an IEP, right? That's an individualized education program, and that the reason for that, and inherently in that IEP are goals that are set for that student on a yearly basis, right? So an IEP runs for a year, the team can meet any point throughout that year, but at minimum they need to meet on a yearly basis to discuss goals for that year for that student. And those goals are very targeted and very specific around the area of need and the growth that the team and the parents want to see for that year. So there's the data we're discussing is just phenomenal conversation about kind of this overlay structure and what we're seeing as growth in comparison to those all student assessment areas. And a second layer that we're talking about, and we have to keep in mind for our students in special ed, is that they have a whole other team wrapped around them that is working with them pretty much every day or multiple times a week, that are working on very, very specific target goals that team has made for them for that year. So it's kind of this dual purpose growth that we're looking at, right? Are they making growth on our universal screeners and MCAS and all of those areas, and, right, are we making sure that we're also remembering that they have a very specific target program that was spent making sure that that individual student is getting what they need, and what kind of growth are we seeing in that? And I think that the conversation of instructional methods and service delivery model, all of that transcends both of those, which is really great. So we can have all of this data set to discuss kind of these universal screeners, the MCAS piece of it, and then also these very individual student-based growth goals that are set forth on a yearly basis, and kind of pull all that together.
Thank you.
I thought, I could be just imagining this. Was there a license or something that expired for Ames Web, or I thought we weren't using that?
We, for K-3. Yeah,
For
so
K-3,
we
okay.
adopted M-Class for K-3, so there was legislation that went into place on July 1st.
Right,
That
okay.
we had to select a DESE-approved screener for
Okay.
K-3. And so that's why we're using M-Class in K-3 now.
Got
So
it, okay.
we're continuing to use Ames Web because there is no legislation around the math, and M-Class is still in development for math, so we kept Ames Web for math. We also decided for now to keep it for 4 to 6. We may or may not keep that long term. We might choose to go to M-Class. We're not sure yet. When the teachers originally looked at it, M-Class, when you get to the upper grades, only offers oral reading fluency and the maze, which is like a passage with blanks in it, and you have to figure out what words would go in there, which is a measure of comprehension. But it's not like reading passages with questions like the kids would usually have.
Sure.
So Ames Web is more like reading passages with questions. It's a little bit more like MCAS would be. It also has subtests on vocabulary. It has silent reading fluency. So the teachers, when we looked at this last year and said, should we adopt this K-3 or should we do it K-6? Their feeling is, let's meet the legislation at K-3 at this point, because we actually think we might be getting less information from this screener, because it doesn't have all of the same subtests that we have available in Ames Web, which is why, at least for now, we've made the decision to stay with Ames Web in 4 to 6, and that is meeting what the state guidelines are.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I have a question for you. I'm new to the school committee. When you say we make a decision on what program we're going to, who makes those decisions specifically?
Yeah, so we had a committee that made that decision, that we have a literacy leadership team, which is representative of classroom teachers, administrators, other support personnel within the district, and we looked at the legislation that's required. So these decisions are always made internally in the district. We do come before the school committee and kind of let you know the decisions that we've made. But this particular decision was made by the literacy leadership team and getting presentations from the providers. We only had, frankly, a very short list we could pick from, because it had to be something that was approved by DESE to begin with, and we had to make sure it met our own desire for a digital tool, because it would have been going backwards to go to a paper pencil assessment. So that narrowed the field pretty quickly. And then we had this representative group take a look at it in terms of what would best meet the educational needs of the district, and decided that MClass was the tool that would be the best match. And people have actually really liked it. It's given a lot of fine-grained data that they found helpful from an instructional standpoint. Sure.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, moving on to chronic absenteeism.
Just a quick update. On day 120 last year, I presented to all 3 towns sort of if we had a 120-day school year, right, what would 10% look like in terms of attendance rate? So these first couple of slides, this is just a reminder what the DESE definition of, right, it's at least 10% of days enrolled. The second slide here is state data, right? So this is across the entire state of Massachusetts. CA is chronic absenteeism. So in 2019, 10% of the elementary population was chronically absent. In 22, 25.5%, that's the 21-22 school year. We always go by the date is always the second year of the school year. In 23, the 22-23 school year, it came down a little bit. When they do the 19 to 23 analysis, right, it jumped 100%. Elementary, middle school, schools that have K to 8s across the state, 12 to 30 to 24. Straight middle schools, just the middle school grades, 11 to 25 to 20. Middle school, high school combos, 22, 37, 32. And then high school in general was already kind of high to begin with, and then, it went to 30. So it looks like great, it was only 30%, but to me that was sort of high to begin with. So that's a state one. Slide 3 is just at the November meeting when Peggy did the MCAS presentation. What I had circled there, this was one of the slides. Here locally in Middleton in 18-19, we had 5.4% of our population that was absent 10% or more. 21-22, so you're seeing it sort of matching the state data, right? It was about 20%. And then 22-23, about 11.8%, right? So it's around that sort of 103 mark or so, because if you take that 5.4 and double it, right, you'd be at 10.8, and so it's a little bit above 100%. So we did a quick analysis of 23-24 attendance. So this is based on 1/3 of the school year being completed, right? So this was around the 60-day mark. I think I did this the Monday or Tuesday before Thanksgiving break. It was day 58, but for all intents and purposes, call it day 60, kind of give you a metric, right? So at that time, around the 60th day, if you look at the chart there, we had 11 kiddos that were 6 days absent. So that would have been, the 10%, so to speak, right? If it was a 60-day school year, we would have had 11 kiddos that were absent for 6 days, and then we would have had 16 kids that were absent 6+ days. And then what I did on the right there was 6+ defined. We had 8 students at 7, 1 student at 8, 1 at 9, 1 at 10, 1 at 11, 1 at 12, 1 at 13, 1 at 14, 1 at 17. And then Hal Manning 6 days, we had 15 students that had been absent 6 days. If it was a 60-day school year, these are the sort of percentages of kiddos that would have been considered chronically absent. And then 26 students that have been absent 6+ days. And again, you can see the breakdown on the right there of the number of days. If you go to the next slide, it sort of shows you like, okay, 9.4, so on a 60-day year, if we were just a 60-day school year, it's coming down, right? We were 5.4, 20.5, 11.8, and it's heading in the right direction, right? It's 9.4 and 9.4. It's coincidental that it's both 9.4. If you go back up, it's just based on enrollment and the number of kids, and so it's not like it's 11 and 11 and 16 and 16. It's not like it's, the same kids, let's say, or within the same unit or whatever the case may be. I would say that's kind of coincidental. But if you go back to slide 4, what I want to do is like in this little gray bar, if I move it out of the way, there were a number of kids sort of like knocking on the door of 6 days, right? We had 18 kiddos at Fuller Meadow that were at 5 days, and we had 21 kiddos that were at 5 days at Howe Manning. And so, again, this was at like day 57 or 58, so there may have been a couple of kids that were sort of pushed into the 6-day category. If, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, that's a common day that people are traveling, and that might have been an absent kind of a day or for some families. So this is nothing more than just informational. It's being talked about at the state level quite a bit, so I always want to make sure you guys are informed. Like, these are some state conversations that are happening around chronic absenteeism. Locally, we're not immune to this. We're seeing similar patterns with it. These numbers may end here, right? It might just be that 11 and 15 doesn't change, and when we do the 120-day mark, our number may be down even more, because when we do this on day 120, I'll say to you, like, if it was a 120-day school year, how many kids are absent? 12 days. How many kids are absent more than 12 days? So on and so forth. So more just an FYI, it's just sort of building off. It was one slide from the MCAS presentation that was around chronic absenteeism. As I said, at the state level, it's a conversation that is being had as well. It's not unique to Middleton. It's not unique to Massachusetts. It's not unique to the United States. We're just seeing this coming out of those COVID years where a higher degree of chronic absenteeism is occurring. And so I think the more we can just sort of talk about it and have conversation about it, just kind of keeps it on the radar for folks, and just keeping and being mindful of it as we navigate through. Obviously, we do not want, if a student is sick, they should not be coming to school. We're not promoting that, right? We don't want someone who is not feeling well to come to school. And in many cases, these are kids that are not feeling well or sick, or, fortunately, COVID hasn't been a thing. We still have occasional cases here and there, but it's not like it was years ago when we were mired in that soup, so to speak. So informational more than anything else, but just wanted the committee to be aware of it.
I had one question.
Yeah.
I thought. I know that we don't want sick kids in school, and people are going to go on vacation, and we can't say, no, you can't go on vacation. But for students that, for whatever reason, just can't get to school, or for whatever reason, they just have trouble getting out
Like
the
a
door.
school refusal situation?
Or something like that. Is there anything that the district does, whether statewide or townwide,
Yeah.
that we can help to step in to get them into the building?
Yeah, I appreciate that offer of help always. Jen and Jeff will be able to speak more eloquently about that than I can, but I can tell you that the personal relationships that staff members have with kids, the outreach, the phone calls. In the course of my career, I've seen staff members go to houses and talk to kids or greet them at the car and, try to have them, come into the building. But you guys can probably speak more eloquently to that than I could.
Yeah, they're all different when you come across it, but yeah, like Scott said, some of it is coming up with a plan at drop-off. Sometimes it's calling the house and talking to the kids. Sometimes it's going and seeing them. And it depends on who they have a relationship with, who would do that, but case by case.
Yeah.
I think it is case by case. In some cases, like, I had a meeting with a family recently, and it was a mindset that by having an open conversation, you could see it shift right at the table in a good way. We have kids that have trouble coming in, so we have people on deck. We have plans for those kids. We work with the family. We had a situation with some tardies. You find ways to get the kid to want to come in the morning, like maybe you can have an important job to help us with first thing in the morning. So we're constantly trying to figure out strategies to help families with this. So in a lot of cases we have success, and in some we don't. That's that's hard.
Yeah.
And we keep at it. We're pretty tenacious, I think.
Yeah.
And it's
Okay.
not a huge issue either. Usually it's more anxiety getting into the building, but
Yeah.
not flat out refusing to come.
Yeah.
It's a fairly rare occurrence.
Okay,
More of a radar, that's all.
okay,
Just keep it on the radar.
yep.
And then the final thing, the TTU meeting is next week, and it's Wednesday, that's one important thing. So it's, Boxford has the wheel this year, and typically we follow the Boxford meeting, and Boxford meetings are usually on Thursday. But because of some scheduling things and people traveling, we had to put it on Wednesday. So the TTU meeting is Wednesday, and then the other important thing is it's a Zoom meeting. And the reason it's a Zoom meeting is because the Boxford meeting had to be a Zoom meeting, and it would have been nutty to try to do Boxford on Zoom and then free people up and get people to Cole and all that jazz. So we just said, I spoke to Kim Nguyen, who's the chair, and she said, just make it a Zoom, it'll be easier. So it's 7:15 on Wednesday of next week for Michelle, Dave, and Joe?
Yes, no, me, Jackie, and Dave.
Okay, Michelle, Jackie, Dave. Joe.
Yeah.
Joe.
Me, Joe, and Jackie.
Okay, got it. So anyway, the three people who are
We'll
the
see who shows
representatives to
up.
the TTU committee, it's a Zoom, and the agenda will be out later this week. So you can have the Zoom link and all those pieces,
Okay.
so.
Awesome.
And then just one quick other, Michelle.
Yep.
NESDEC, for those of you who've been on the committee a while, NESDEC is they do the enrollments, projections and all that, and I'll do that in January at the January meeting. I'll give you those, we'll go through the whole study of what they've found and, spoiler alert, enrollment is, this in Middleton, right? It's not, we're not seeing that, like a lot of districts are seeing, sharp decline in enrollment, we're not seeing that. As we've said for over the years, Boxford, for whatever reason, we still don't think it's accurate, but they were showing like a steep incline. So Middleton will bounce up 20, down 20 for the next 10 years. So that's good news, right? It's not like, uh-oh, guys, we need to talk about building a new school or adding a wing on a school. Like, we're not having those conversations. But it will have staffing implications, right? Those years that we go up, we may be coming to you and having staffing conversations. The year that they go down, we may be coming to you and saying we need to eliminate a position, so on and so forth. But we'll ride that wave, but I'll take you through that whole projection. It's a 10-year projection out to 2034, and what that will look like at the January meeting.
And I think we just need to accept bills and payroll. So would anyone like to accept bills and payroll as presented?
I will make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? All right, I will make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thanks, everybody.
Thank you,
Okay,
everyone.
thank you, Paul.